All right. Hello, everybody. A very good morning to everybody in the UK, and a big hello to everybody else all across the world. Uh, so, the webinar for today is PCI DSS version 4.0.1, governing your PCI DSS compliance. Okay, so my name is Kunal Sikdar. I will be the speaker for this webinar. I've got about 14 years of industry experience working in cybersecurity and auditing. I have a lot of experience working on cardholder data security, cardholder payment security. Uh, I have worked both as an implementer and as an auditor. I've certified more than 50 clients now all across the world. And I have worked for banks, I've worked for service providers, I have implemented controls for PCI DSS. I have certified various clients in all sorts of industries. I've been working for Tufsud for the past 4 years now. I'm the lead QSA here, and we also conduct a lot of regulatory audits here in India. And recently, we've also helped a lot of clients achieve their version 4.0 transition. So as you know, the current version for PCI DSS is version 4, which was released maybe a couple of years ago. So we've helped a lot of clients transition from version 3.2.1 into 4.0. A brief about the webinar, the kind of topics that we're going to cover here. So we'll begin with a quick introduction, of course, of what is PCI DSS and who does it apply to. Next, we move on to the scoping. So as an organization, how you should go about scoping your environment. We'll have a look at that. Next, we'll have a look at implementation of controls and how what are the activities that you need to conduct in order to make sure that the governance of all these controls is in place, especially after your certification is completed. We'll have a quick look at concepts such as compensating controls and customized approach, followed by a brief look at the kind of services that we at TUVSUD can offer you as a QSA company. So we'll have a look at that. And of course, that would be followed by the Q&A. Just one request, if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat right away, or you can address them to me right at the end. That's completely up to you. But we will be taking your questions at the end, not in the middle. All right, so I hope everyone is on board. So let's begin with the first topic, which is a quick introduction. So what is PCI DSS, right? We need to understand it is basically a compliance standard, right? It applies to companies that store, process, transmit, or receive cardholder information. But it also can act as a very good cybersecurity framework, right? See, at the core of it all, it is a standard, it is a compliance standard that is designed around securing cardholder data. But essentially, you can replace cardholder data with any kinds of sensitive information or any kind of data that is important for you, right? This acts as a framework in order to secure that particular data. We'll have a look at why. So at its core, it applies to companies that either store, process, transmit, or receive any kind of cardholder information, either encrypted or otherwise. There is a very common misconception among those that have not dealt with the PCI DSS before, that if I am exposed to only encrypted card numbers, or if I store card numbers in an encrypted format, maybe the PCI DSS standard doesn't apply to me, right? But it very much does. So hence I have written here that even if it is encrypted, right, it is important that you go for PCI DSS and get yourself certified. All right. So PCI DSS, as you know, is a collection of a lot of controls, right? There are more than 300 controls, but they are broadly categorized into 12 requirements, as you can see here on the screen. Right from requirement number 1, which talks about network security. Then we have requirements for system security. We have requirements for storing cardholder data. There are specific requirements defined as to how exactly you need to store card data. Then you can find requirements for physical security, documentation, governance requirements. So like I talked about earlier, that it is a framework, right? It acts as a framework to secure your cardholder data and to make sure that your cardholder data stays secure when it is getting stored, processed, or even when it is getting transmitted. All right, so this is the version 4.0 that you all know is now the only active version. So this is a brief timeline chart of the version 4. It was released back in Q1 of 2022. And so the council has allowed a transition wherein the newer requirements were initially introduced as a best practice, as a good to have, right? They were not introduced straight away as a requirement. So the transition is going to come to an end now, and all the future dated requirements in about, I think, in the next 4 to 5 days are all going to become full-time requirements from best practices. As you can see, the orange dot here, we are in Q1 of 2025. So that is when all of the future dated requirements become active, become effective, and then version 4 is the only version that we have now. Of course, we have the latest version 4.0.1, which is a very minor change. So that now is the only active version. The older version, which was 3.2.1, got expired in Q1 of 2024, which was last year. So that was a brief about PCI DSS, a quick introduction. Now let's get into the scoping, right? So you as an organization, when you decide to go for PCI DSS certification, one of the most important activities I would say that you need to conduct is your scoping activity. If you get your scoping right, then your entire certification will go smoothly, and there will not be any last minute surprises, right? So it is very essential that you get your scoping correct. So what is scoping, right? When an organization decides to go for PCI DSS, right? An organization can have multiple applications, they can have multiple locations, they can have multiple networks that they have in scope, right? They could be on-prem, they could be on cloud. Now, when you do PCI DSS, like we said, it focuses on cardholder data. Hence, it is very important to understand what aspects of your organization are to be taken into the scope, right? So let's have a look at that. So there are two parts to it, essentially, right? The first part is where you need to understand your cardholder data environment, which is the CDE, right? So what essentially it means is cardholder data environment is the part of your scope which is directly exposed to card data, right? So here, when you do the scoping activity yourself, when you're trying to identify your CDE, you have to analyze your cardholder data exposure, right? There are 4 ways in which you have to do this. One, you need to identify the kind of applications that are exposed to cardholder data, right? When we talk about applications, they could be a gateway application, they could be a CRM application, they could be a reporting application, right? From a banking perspective, they could be a mobile application, they could be a net banking application, they could be a switching application, right? So all the applications that are directly exposed to cardholder data, they need not store cardholder data, but if they are exposed, which means if they are receiving any kind of cardholder data, like we said, either encrypted or unencrypted, then they become a CDE application. So all the CDE applications is what you need to identify first. Number 2, once you've identified the applications, then you move on to the network. The network scoping is the most important part, right? The applications are of course going to be hosted on servers, and the servers are of course going to be hosted on some or the other network, right? It could be on-prem, it could be on cloud. So identifying what network components or what network segments your applications are being hosted in is very important, okay? Because let's say there's a network segment A. Now network segment A is going to host an application A, which you have identified as a cardholder data application. Now, the fact that that application is hosted in that particular network, the entire network becomes our CDE. The entire network has to be taken as our cardholder data environment. So in a sense, if there are 100 servers in that particular network segment, right, only 50 of them belong to the card data application. The other 50 by default come into the scope as your CDE segment, right? So you have to identify the parts of your network that are being exposed to cardholder data, right? So even if card data is going to a reporting application, and that reporting application might be hosted in an internal network zone, that internal network zone will come into the scope as your cardholder data environment network, CDE network, right? So once you've identified the applications, once you've identified your networks, then you identify where all you are storing cardholder data. Okay. Now, when it comes to storing cardholder data, they may or may not be stored in the database of the identified applications. But apart from the databases, they can be stored on desktops, local desktops. They can be stored on backup servers. They can be stored on file servers. They can be stored on email servers, right? So you have to identify all the other places where cardholder data is getting stored. Okay, so that's number 3. And then number 4, you have to identify the physical locations as well. As we talked about, that the PCI DSS is a framework, right? And physical security controls is part of the framework. So not only the logical part, but the physical security is also part of it. Hence, you need to identify all the physical locations that are in scope. Now, one example I can give you here is when suppose you're taking a backup, right? You're taking backup on tapes. Now, backup tapes might be getting stored in an offsite location. Now, even though the offsite location is not connected to your main data center network wise, but the fact that you are storing the backup tapes in the offsite location, and these backup tapes, if they have cardholder data, the backup tape storage location itself has to be considered as a CDE for the physical location, right? So you have to identify all such physical locations that are in scope and that are part of your cardholder data environment, which is the CDE. So that is how you identify your cardholder data environment. Now, once you've identified your CDE, the next step is when you identify all the connected systems. Now, when it comes to connected systems, right, the concept is that all the systems that connect into your CDE are to be taken into the scope. Now, what kind of systems they could be? Here are a few examples. So we have AD, we've got patch management, we've got SIEM, configuration management, NTP, FIM, anti-malware, right? Non-card backup servers. So all the systems and the networks that are getting connected to the CDE networks and the CDE systems are also to be taken part of your scope as the connected systems, right? So this is very important. In fact, if you go through the entire compliance standard, one thing that you will see is that most of the controls, right, are around these connected systems, because these are support services, right? Hence, I have written here that we have to identify the support services. The services that you are offering to your CDE are the support services that form the scope, that form your non-CDE in scope. All right. So this is how you scope your environment. You scope your CDE, then you scope in your connected systems, and together they form your scope for certification, and then everything else then becomes your out of scope. Okay. So this is how it works. All right. Now, when you are focusing on your scoping activity, these are a list of important documents, that you might want to work on. One is, of course, going to be your network architecture diagram, right, which clearly outlines your network, which segments are CDE, which segments are non-CDE or connected systems, right, and what components are out of scope. So if you have this demarcation, that will really help you understand what is going to be your scope and what is not in scope, right? So your network diagram, then you have your network segmentation details, what network segments are to be taken into the scope, which network segments are not to be taken into the scope, right? Those should be handy with you. of course, a list of cardholder data applications. So we just talked about how you need to identify your cardholder data applications. All of that, you need to list them down, right? In the list is not only the name of the application, but all the interfaces, all the mobile application, iOS, Android, right? The list of URLs, the list of APIs, right? All of these need to be maintained properly because they form the very basis of your certification, and you need to conduct application security testing on all of them, right? So that is going to be very important. Then of course your data flow diagrams, all your data flow diagrams need to be maintained for all applications in scope, right? Showing how exactly the cardholder data is flowing through your systems, flowing through your networks. So data flow diagram is something as detailed as you can, right? The more detailed you make it, the more it is better for you as well as the assessor when he comes in for the certification, to get a fair understanding of how exactly the application is working, how exactly the cardholder data is flowing through your applications, right? And it will help him do his scoping as well, and it will help him in order to exactly know what components are to be taken into the scope. All right. Then we have list of locations. Of course, like we said, you need to list down all the physical locations. And then we have something called as a cardholder data matrix. Now, cardholder data matrix is nothing but a matrix that contains all the locations of where you are storing cardholder data, right? Like we spoke about, they could be in the database of your CDE applications, right? They could be in data warehouses, they could be on file servers, backup servers, right? So within the matrix, you have to define exact location, right? You have to define what methodology has been used in order to secure the stored cardholder data, right? And of course, you have to define for how long are you going to retain it. So what is the retention that has been defined for stored cardholder data? So it contains all kinds of details like that. So cardholder data matrix is what you need to prepare. So this is all about scoping, right? This is how you go about scoping your environment and knowing exactly what you have in scope for your certification for PCI. Now, next, let's move on to the implementation, right? So once your scoping is completed, you know exactly what you are dealing with, what you have on hand, and what exactly is going to be your scope. Then comes your implementation part. As we spoke about, there are more than 300 controls, right? Which can be very overwhelming. There are 12 requirements, correct? They've already been categorized, but if you go and read it, right, it becomes very difficult because it is a 300-page long document. There are requirements given, there are guidance given, right? There's a lot that is given there. So it helps when you categorize these 300 controls into simpler categories, right? Which is exactly what I've done here. So when you begin implementing your PCI DSS requirements, right, it's very important that these are the 4 main categories, according to me, which are important to focus on. One is, of course, going to be the technical controls. This is a technical certification, technical standard, and there are a lot of technical controls that are to be put in place, which includes your network controls, which includes your system level controls, right? All the hardening controls when it comes to the services that is running on your system, the users that are defined on your system, right? The password policy, the lockout policy, idle timeout, right? All of those hardening controls, technical hardening controls are to be put in place on the scoped systems. This includes your CDE as well as the non-CDE both. All right. And then, of course, you have your application level controls, whether you're able to see full card numbers on the application screens, whether it allows for reports being exported from applications that could contain full card numbers, right? So there's a host of things to consider here, along with your hardening controls. So all of these technical controls form the first category of controls that we have. And of course, lastly, we also have the database controls, which are all defined in requirement number 8. Okay. Then after technical controls, you have your software development controls. Now, in case you have in-house software development, right, which means you have developers developing your cardholder data applications, then of course there are a set of requirements that have been defined, especially in requirement number 6. So you have your secure coding guidelines, right? The guidelines that you need to use in order to develop your cardholder data applications in a secure manner. Then you have secure code reviews, how exactly you can review whether the code has been written in adherence to the guidelines that have been defined. So you need to conduct secure code reviews. Then we have you need to make sure that your dev, UAT, and prod environments are segregated properly, right? Not only at the environment level, but also at the user level, right? So users from dev, UAT are not having access to prod and vice versa. And also there are a few requirements when it comes to trainings for developers, right? They need to be trained on an annual basis on secure coding, right? How to conduct secure code reviews, how to review the reports, right? Basically it revolves around making sure that if you're developing applications in-house, they are being done in a secure manner, right? So then you have your software development controls or system development controls. Then you move on to policy, procedures, and guidelines, right? The documentation. Now, in PCI DSS certification, there is a host of documents that need to be made, right? Some would be common to the other kind of audits that you may do. So you may have your IS policy, you may have your different policy documents, different security procedure documents, you may have your hardening guidelines, roles and responsibility documents, right? All of those kinds of documents which you will have, which is good. But then there are some specific documents when it comes to your cardholder data matrix, the one that we just talked about on the last slide. Then you have your scope validation document, which is a new requirement in version 4.0, where you have to define, as an organization, you have to yourself define the scope and get that approved by the higher management, right? So that when the QSA comes in and he does his own independent scoping, you can compare the two and make sure that you both are on the same page, your organization as well as the QSA, right? So all of these documentation is one category that you can consider. And of course, lastly, we have the cardholder data storage controls. Now, if you are an organization that decides to store cardholder data, right, then there are particular controls defined as to how you can go about storing the card data, right? You can use options like encryption, you can use truncation, you can use hashing, tokenization, right? So encryption is fairly simple, where you encrypt the card data. Truncation is where you only retain maybe the first 6 and the last 4 digits, and the middle digits have to be completely wiped off such that they cannot be retrieved again, right? So maybe you can put a junk value in the middle, so you can retain first 6, then you will have junk value, and then the last 4. When you are able to achieve that, that is called as truncation. Then you have hashing. Hashing is of course a one-way hash, wherein from the hash value you will never be able to come back to the original card number. But a new requirement that has been introduced in version 4 is that hashes have to be cryptographic hashes, right? So that is something that you need to consider. Then of course you have tokenization. Tokenization is where you give an alternate value or an alternate number to the card number, right? So there will be one system which will have the mapping of the original card number to the alternate card number, and then in all the other systems throughout your scope you have only the alternate card number. Now tokenization is a very good tool in order to limit your card data storage, because token number is not card number, right? So if you manage to create a system wherein one system will hold the mapping and then all of the rest of the systems will only have the tokenized number, the tokenized numbers, if they are properly designed at the network level, we can manage to scope it out of the scope. Okay, so tokenization is a very handy tool. And of course, as an organization, if you want to limit your scope, right, the best way to store card data is to not store it at all, right? All the controls become applicable, all these encryption algorithms and all become applicable only due to the fact that you are storing cardholder data. If you can manage to limit the places where you are storing cardholder data, you can really manage to limit your scope, right? And if you manage to limit your scope, you will be able to manage the cost of your certification, the cost of compliance, right? Because as you know, that PCI DSS is an ongoing compliance. There are a lot of quarterly activities that you need to do, half-yearly activities that you need to do, that we will be coming on to in the next few slides. But if you can somehow manage to limit your scope by not storing cardholder data at all, that will really help you lower the cost of your certification. All right. Next, I want to focus a bit on the encryption requirements, right? Because we just spoke on the last slide that one of the ways that you can use to secure the stored cardholder data is by encrypting cardholder data, right? So there are specific requirements when it comes to data encryption or cardholder data encryption. One is, of course, you need to use a strong cryptographic encryption mechanism, right? Which is a given. There's no debate on that. But the key that you use in order to encrypt the card number, right, is usually referred to as DEK or data encrypting key, card data encrypting key, DEK. Now, there are further requirements that how you can store the DEK, right? So the DEK can be stored further encrypted using another key, which is also referred to as the key encrypting key or KEK, right? And then KEK can be stored separately in plain text. That is okay. But the data encryption key should never be stored in plain text. So that is the requirement here. The reason for this is if your KEK is compromised, right, or if your DEK is compromised, then both of them might get compromised. Hence, the requirement says that you need to further encrypt your DEK with another key, and then of course you need to store these two keys completely separately, right? There cannot be any correlation between the two, and they should be completely stored separately, so that if one is compromised, the other would remain intact, or the other would remain secure. And without having access to both the keys, you will never be able to decrypt the card number. So that is the logic behind it, right? So that is option number one. Second option to secure your DEK is you have to store it within a secure cryptographic device. We call it SCD. An example of SCD could be a HSM, right? It could be a KMS, a key management system. It could be a service given by your cloud providers. It could be a secure vault given by some service provider, right? It completely depends. So if you manage to store your DEK within a secure cryptographic device, which means that from that SCD you won't be able to retrieve the clear text DEK, then it is okay. All right. Or if you're not even able to achieve that, what you can do is you can have two full-length key components, right? And of course, then they need to be stored separately, right? But you cannot split a single key, right? You cannot have a single length key and then you can split it. No, you need two full length keys and you need to use it together. And then of course you need to store it separately, right? So these are ways that have been defined if you want to secure your DEK. All right. So that, and then of course the key encrypting key, if you're using, it should be at least as strong as your DEK, data encrypting key. The key encrypting key is to be stored separately from the DEK, right? Keys are stored securely in the fewest possible locations, right? If you're duplicating the key, that is a big no-no. If there's a business requirement, one can understand, but otherwise it has to be stored in the fewest possible locations. And of course, every key should have a custodian assigned, and the custodian has to formally sign a key custodian form, which formally accepts, and they formally accept their responsibilities as the custodian, right? So all of these controls one needs to follow when it comes to the encryption of cardholder data. These are all defined in requirement number 3. All right. Now let's talk about governance, right? Governance is an important term. So we've talked about the implementation. We've talked about scoping. We've talked about implementation. Now we talk about governance, right? Once you have achieved your certification, right, there are a few governance activities that you need to conduct, right, which is here right in front of you. So there are daily activities. So you have automated log reviews, right? In version 4, they have made log reviews compulsorily to be automated. right? Which means that manual log reviews are no longer accepted. And then, of course, your incident response you have to do on a daily basis based on the logs that you read. If there is an incident, you have to respond right away. Okay. On a monthly basis, you have to implement your critical security patches. Okay. And on a quarterly basis, you can implement your non-critical security patches. Of course, if there is a zero-day attack or if there is a patch that has been released on an urgent basis, of course, the standard does say monthly, but of course, that is going to be ASAP, right? Because you want your systems to be secured from that particular attack. So as and when such critical patches are getting released, it is highly recommended that you implement it straight away. Then in the quarterly reviews, you have to do a review of cardholder data storage, right? So once you've defined your cardholder data matrix, right, as we discussed, all the locations where you store your cardholder data, that matrix needs to be reviewed on a quarterly basis to ensure that none of the stored cardholder data is exceeding its retention period. Okay, so that is a quarterly review that you need to conduct. Then of course you need to do internal VA on all your internal IPs on the entire scope, CDE as well as non-CDE. You need to conduct your external VA, which is also called as ASV scanning, right? That needs to be conducted by an approved scanning vendor. And then your wireless scanning. So you need to check your physical locations for any rogue wireless access points, right? So that has to be conducted on a quarterly basis. On a half-yearly basis, you need to do your network security configuration reviews, your segmentation testing. We talked about network segmentation and how it can be used in order to limit your scope. So that needs to be reviewed formally, right? Which we also call as segmentation testing, which has a report attached to it. So that report needs to be made, and that whole activity needs to be conducted on a half-yearly basis. And also your user list review. So all the users that have been defined on your systems, on your in-scope systems, need to be reviewed on a half-yearly basis. And then, of course, on an annual basis, you need to conduct your penetration testing, that is internal, external, both. Your InfoSec trainings, awareness trainings, your policy procedure reviews for all the documentation, your targeted risk analysis, and updating your cardholder data matrix, right? Your CHD matrix, cardholder data matrix, needs to be updated every time you go for a recertification. So that is technically every year. Okay, so these are activities that need to be planned, right? Because if after certification you completely overlook all of these things, when it is time for your recertification, you will realize that a lot of these activities have got missed out, and you will not be able to go back and conduct all the VA scanning and ASV scanning, right? So you need to make sure that even after certification, the governance of PCI controls is very strong, and make sure that all the activities are planned and happen as and when it is required to happen. All right, so that was all about the implementation, right? Now let's talk about two concepts which are very interesting. One is compensating controls. We'll come to that later. But first, let's speak about customized approach, right? So what is customized approach? So customized approach is something where you as an organization get a chance to define or design your own controls, right? So right from the start, we've been saying that there are more than 300 controls, right? All the 300 controls are well defined. It's basically black and white, right? To the length of the password that you're going to set, to the time duration of your idle timeout, right? Everything has been minutely defined by the council in the standard, right? Everything has been defined. But let's say there's a particular control that is defined in the standard, but you have a different kind of technology and you have a different kind of control that is able to meet the same requirement, that is able to meet the same intent of the requirement, right? So the council has given you an opportunity to define something as a customized approach. You are saying that you don't have the original control in place, but you have something that is even better, right? So how does that work? So basically, in order to define customized approach, right? First of all, you need to identify which out of the 300 plus controls, which exact requirement or which exact control you are trying to replace, right? So you have to first identify the risk. So identify the risk of the original control not being there. So if the original control is not there, what is the risk, right? Then I understand the intent of the original control. What is the original control trying to do, right? You have to understand that intent. Second is where you define the approach. So you have identified the risk, you've understood the intent. Now you are defining your approach, that this is the new approach that you have, right? You define the alternative control that mitigates the original risk, and you ensure that the controls are applied to all personnel in the PCI DSS scope. So if you're putting a particular control, it cannot be only for one person or two person, right? Everybody in the CDE and the non-CDE, right? Everybody that is in scope, it should be uniform for all of them, right? So you have to identify the risk, then you define the approach, right? And then from an organization perspective, it is very important that you document the control. So document is something that you do using a controls matrix that is provided by the council. The template for the same has been provided by the council. It's nothing but you are defining your approach, right? And you are defining how exactly you plan your new approach plans to meet the original intent, right, of the original requirement. So once you fill the controls matrix, you can get it. So if you already are working with a QSA, that's fantastic. Once you've filled the controls matrix, you can straight away share the controls matrix with the QSA for his review, right? For his comments. Maybe he might have some recommendations. Maybe he might be or might not be okay with it, right? So that discussion can happen at an early stage, even before your certification, so that there are no last minute surprises, right? So it is important to document the control. And after documenting the control, it is very important that you perform a targeted risk analysis, right? Targeted risk analysis is nothing but you are checking whether the new control that you have put, right, or that you have within your environment, your customized approach, is that really able to meet the intent of the last and mitigate the risk of the original control being in place, right? So you perform a targeted risk analysis and you document the findings of the targeted risk analysis. Okay. So in a sense, what you need to do is you need to perform the testing of your customized approach, and you need to document each and everything, right? You need to perform an independent testing of the customized controls, independent of the QSA. So without the QSA, you yourself need to conduct the testing. You need to document the results of the testing. You need to maintain all evidences of the testing procedures, right? You need to maintain that entire file, and you need to showcase the evidences and the results to the assessor or to the QSA, either during the certification or beforehand, right? Now, one very important thing I keep mentioning about the assessor here is because the council has given complete authority or the right to the QSA, right? The assessor, your assessor, to either reject or accept the customized approach, which means that if you've defined a customized approach, you've done the independent security testing, you've done everything, you've collected all evidences, but if your QSA is not convinced, if your QSA or your assessor is not convinced or is not satisfied with the results and he is refusing to accept it as a customized approach, then you as an organization do not have an option, right? So it is very important for you to get your QSA on board, right? Your QSA should be agreeable to the customized approach. Okay, clear? And then, of course, we talked about the targeted risk analysis, the identification of the assets being protected. I identify the threats that are there of not having the original control, right? Analysis of likelihood or impact of the threat being realized, documenting the justification for and how frequently are you going to perform the review of the customized controls, and review of each targeted risk analysis must be conducted at least once every 12 months, right? So the targeted risk analysis of the customized approach needs to be conducted on an annual basis. All right, so next we have compensating controls, right? Which is another way of not being able to meet the original requirement, right? So in customized approach, we talked about having an alternate method to completely mitigate the original risk, right? So if you are able to completely mitigate a risk by the alternate control, then you can call it as a customized control or a customized approach. But if you are not able to completely mitigate the risk, right, there is a few residue risk that is left, then you can very well show that as a compensating control. But along with the customized control, you might have to show maybe a few more controls in order to lower the risk of the original control not being there, right? So in compensating control, you don't have to do anything. That is, your QSA will be helping you in defining the compensating control. Okay, so if for whatever reason, let's say the minimum password length is 12 characters, right, but your system is only allowing for 8 characters, there is no option for you to set the 12 characters which is required, right? So in that case, you can have a compensating control. You can identify the risk that is being there of the original control. Again, this is the same concept. The original control is not there, hence what is the kind of risk that is arising because the original control is not there? You are trying to compensate for that risk by putting some sort of alternate control, right? But instead of customized approach, you are able to fully mitigate that. Here you are not able to fully mitigate, but you are able to lower the risk, and that can act as a compensating control, right? Similar to customized approach, all evidences have to be maintained. The compensating control worksheet needs to be filled, but here the only difference is that in customized approach, the controls matrix had to be filled by the organization. In compensating control, the QSA will be filling the compensating control worksheet with the help of the organization, right? So here the onus is more on the QSA, and there the onus was more on the organization. And of course, compensating controls also must be regularly reviewed for its effectiveness, right? So what I have put as a compensating control today might not be as effective maybe 6 months down the line, right? So that review, that constant review of the compensating controls also need to take place in order to ensure that they are being effective. All right. So that is all about customized approach and compensating control. I am sure you may have a few questions on this because this is a little bit of a complicated topic. I have tried to cover it in 15 minutes as fast as I can, but I'm sure that you will be having questions. So feel free to drop in your questions in the chat box. All right, with that, let's have a look at the services that we as a QSA organization offer. All right. So as a QSA organization, of course, we can get you PCI DSS certified for version 4.0.1, which is now the latest version. We also do gap assessments. For first-time clients that are going for certification for the very first time, we do a thorough gap assessment of your systems, and we give you a detailed gap report, which contains all the gaps along with our recommendations. And we one thing that we do is we map each and every gap with the exact requirement number, right? So you get a full picture as to what exactly is the gap, what controls are missing, and you can even go back and read the original compliance standard and check what the original control is saying, right? So we can give you a full gap assessment report at the end of the gap assessment. And of course, once we've submitted the gap report, we can also help you make an implementation plan, right? Now, one important thing is we cannot actively take part in implementation, right? Because we cannot implement something that we are going to certify at a later date, right? But we can always recommend from our side. Of course, we have to be vendor neutral, but we recommend all sorts of controls that need to be put in place in order to ensure that you get certified. So yes, all right. Then simplifying the approach, we do consulting work, as I just said. We can help you identify what kind of controls that you can put, right? And also when it comes to the definition of your compensating controls, right? So for example, if you're not able to meet any of the requirements, we help you identify how you can go about defining your compensating controls, and how you can really lower the risk. Okay. So we do all that consulting as well. So roadmap for future dated requirements. Of course, all the future dated requirements are going to become full requirements now in the next 4 days. Validation of future dated requirements, revalidation of the implemented controls. We also do security testing activities like VAPT, ASV scanning. So we can help you with that, and also customized approach support. So in case you decide to go for customized approach, and you want to get it validated, as your QSA, we'll be more than happy to help you validate and go ahead with that. Okay. And lastly, of course, we have the audit and certification. So we can conduct the audit for you. We can conduct certification, at the end of which you will be getting your report on compliance, ROC. You'll be getting your attestation of compliance, which is AOC. And also, if you have any sort of self-assessment questionnaire, SAQ requirements, then we can help you with that as well. All right. So with that, I think we have come to the end of the webinar. So I hope it was informative for you all. So now, if you have any questions, just feel free to put them all in the chat, so that one by one, we'll just go through it. All right. So we've got a couple here. All right. So first is someone's asked, is it compulsory to outsource your ASV scanning to a third-party vendor? All right. Good question. So yes, as per the council's requirement, your ASV needs to be conducted by an approved scanning vendor. It's in the name, right? Approved scanning vendor, ASV. So yes. So the tool that is being used in order to conduct your ASV scanning, it's got nothing but a VA scan, right? It's a vulnerability assessment scan. But yes, it has to be conducted using an ASV tool. That ASV tool is certified by the council. So hence they say that your ASV scanning needs to be conducted using a tool that is certified by the council. Hence you need to outsource it to an approved scanning vendor, ASV. So the answer there is yes. You need to outsource it to an ASV vendor. All right. Another one here is, can the QSA define customized approach, and how can we achieve this? Okay. So like I just explained, right, the QSA cannot define a customized approach. Ideally, it should not be defined by the QSA. A QSA is somebody that validates a customized approach, right? See, customized approach is nothing but an alternate approach. And that alternate approach needs to be come up. So the organization themselves need to come up with the alternate control first, right? So I'll just give you an example. Maybe let's say there is a requirement for wireless scanning, right? Which says that you need to conduct a wireless scan for identifying your rogue wireless access points. Now you come to me as an organization and say that I don't need to waste my resources conducting a wireless scan. Maybe you have more than 500 locations in scope, right? So you will come to me and say that I'll be spending a lot of resources conducting a wireless scan on 500 locations, right? So so you come up to me and say that you have a better technology that nobody will be able to attach any wireless device, right? Maybe you have some state of the art network switch or a network router, right, that will not allow any external connections, which means you will never be able to connect any rogue wireless access point. And you want to consider that as a customized approach, right? Now that is something a QSA cannot come up with, right? The organization has to come up with the idea, that we have an alternate control, we have a customized control, and we want to use this as a customized approach. As a QSA, maybe we can guide you, right, what documents you need to fill, but the defining of the customized approach and the validation of the customized approach and the testing of the customized approach, right, all of that, the onus is on the organization. Maybe you can take a help from another QSA. So one would be your certifying QSA, the one that certifies you. Maybe you can hire another QSA company just for helping you or helping your team in order to define customized control, right? So for customized approach, the onus will always be on the organization. You can definitely get help from outside, but as a QSA, he only can review your worksheet, your customized control matrix, right? And he has to review the results of your testing, and then he needs to perform his own testing to make sure that it is working as intended, and then it's completely up to him whether to accept or reject. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. Okay, any more? Amelia, do we have any more questions here? All right, there's one. Okay, so how long does an organization typically take to obtain compliance on end-to-end approach, including gap assessment only? Fantastic question. Okay, right. So it depends, right? It completely depends. For a smaller organization, maybe it could take a month. For a large scale organization, it could take longer. It also depends on the complexities, right? So if it is a big merchant, again, we can do it faster. But if it is a very big bank, right, that have a lot of exposure to cardholder data, then of course it might take longer. And it also depends on the maturity of your security systems, right? If your systems are really matured, which means that in the gap assessment we get very few gaps, right? If we get very few gaps, then of course you can close them faster and we can get you certified faster, right? But typically I would say for a small to mid-size organization, it takes anywhere between 30 to 60 days end to end, right from the beginning of scoping and gap assessment right up to the certification. And for a large scale organization, it could take anywhere between maybe 60 to 90 days, right? But then again, like I said, I have seen organizations get certified in 45 days. I have seen large scale organizations not get certified for 3 years because they were never able to fill the gaps, right? Because what happens is when the organization is very huge, right, you fix one gap. By the time you fix one gap, the whole environment has already changed. Maybe one application has got sunset, maybe two new applications have got added, right? Maybe you've gone with a different vendor. Earlier you were with one vendor, now you have shifted to some other vendor. Because of the dynamic nature of the business, right, that certainly impacts your certification. And every gap assessment that we do, we always say to the client that this can be valid only for 3 months. After 3 months, unfortunately, we'll have to do a fresh round of gap because we don't know what has changed, right? Unless the business confirms that no, nothing has changed, then yes. Otherwise, it takes a lot to consider a gap report which is more than 3 months old. So typically, like I said, for a small organization or a mid-size, maybe 30 to 60 days. For a big organization, maybe 60 to 90 days. All right, so here's another. Okay, do we need to perform targeted risk analysis for compensating controls? Okay, right. I don't think so. No, I think the answer is no. Targeted risk analysis is something you need to do when you are defining a customized approach. All right. When it comes to the compensating controls, you only need to define the QSA needs to define the compensating control worksheet, and I don't think you need to conduct a targeted risk analysis for a compensating control. All right. So, Amelia, any further questions do we have? All right, I think she's just confirmed. So thank you so much, everybody, and I hope this was an informative session for you all. Right. So I'll just you can feel free to reach out. I am more than happy to answer your questions even after the webinar is done. You can reach me on LinkedIn as well. Right. Not an issue. And I'll be more than happy to answer your questions. So thank you so much.